wasn't enough to design a dress, a coat, or a hat. You had to turn it into a living thing, she insisted, that breathed on its own and was not just an object. She was passionate about what she did, and she infused her vision and energy into her clients, and that turned up on the runway when they showed their clothes, just as it was about to happen when David Fieldston showed his new line to the fashion press and store buyers during Fashion Week in New York. The crowd was waiting breathlessly for the show to start, and while David was being interviewed, Jenny was doing her job, threading her way through the models, watching the hair and makeup with a keen eye, tugging a dress as it was put on, lifting the collar of a jacket, snapping a bracelet on a wrist, changing a shoe at the last minute. No, she said, frowning as dressers put clothes on a model as though she were a doll. The necklace is on backward, and she has the belt upside down. She rapidly made the necessary changes, nodded, and sped across the room to a model who was being sewn into a see-through lace dress. They hadn't had time to put the zipper in before the show. It happened all the time, and Jenny knew the dress would be a showstopper. You could see the model's naked breasts and most of her body except what was concealed by a flesh-colored G-string, which kept the model relatively decent. David had been nervous about it, and Jenny had assured him that it was 1975 and the country was ready to see breasts, at least on the runway, if nowhere else. Rudy Gernreich had come to the same conclusion, and his bold designs were sensational and had been well received. Vogue magazine had been showing breasts for a dozen years since Diana Vreeland introduced them when she was editor-in-chief in 1963. Diana Vreeland was Jenny's role model and goddess. Having realized that she didn't want to work on 7th Avenue and be a designer to earn a living, Jenny had started out as an errand girl at Vogue when she graduated from Parsons 11 years before. She had eventually become the keeper of the closet during Mrs. Vreeland's regime as editor-in-chief. Diana Vreeland had started at Vogue 4 years before Jenny got there. The closet was where all the fabulous clothes were kept, and for a young girl inebriated by fashion and in love with it since her earliest memories, it was sheer heaven. She got to see and touch all the beautiful things going in and out, and how they were put together for every photo shoot. Jenny soon caught the attention of the illustrious Mrs. Vreeland and worshipped at her feet and became her senior assistant. Then Jenny decided to leave the magazine 5 years after she'd arrived. Everyone said she was crazy. She had the perfect job. But she wanted to start her own fashion consulting business, to advise designers and style photo shoots on her own. And remarkably, the only support she got for her project was from Mrs. Vreeland, who secretly told her she was doing the right thing. And much to Jenny's amazement, Diana Vreeland left Vogue at almost the same time. She had become a consultant to the Costume Institute at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and she was in the audience at the Pierre, waiting to see David Fieldston's show that day. She had been incredibly good to Jenny, who was unfailingly loyal to her in exchange. Jenny had easily recognized the senior editor's genius when she worked for her every day and had learned much from her, although she had her own distinctive style. Like a good puppeteer, so nobody would notice her as she worked the strings from backstage, she was wearing black from head to foot, as Mrs. Vreeland had. Jenny's long, shining dark hair swept her shoulders in a straight, blunt cut. She wore very little makeup, and her huge blue eyes took in the entire scene. The models were almost dressed by then, and she was still watching them like a hawk, thinking of nothing else. And seconds later, she could hear the ballroom go quiet and the music come on. They were opening with a Beatles song to keep the mood light. The clothes they were showing were for the following fall season, 7 months away, so store buyers could order them now, and no one in the ballroom cared that it was the beginning of February and snowing outside. Orders had to be placed months in advance. Jenny continued to watch the models as they lined up and got ready to walk the runway. She was almost as tall as they were, minus the high heels. She was long and lean and beautiful herself, but she loved being invisible in this dazzling fashion world, always behind the scenes, making things happen. The producer of the runway show gave her a nod, and she signaled them.